I hope you're doing well. Pardon the little delay. I'm here alone on the farm, and I didn't have an assist from wife on my coffee. So sometimes I make it myself. Sometimes, if I'm a little behind, she helps me. What a beautiful wife! Just the best. I'm coming at you 2 minutes late, but we're doing okay, I think. Bitcoin Graffiti gives us a Mississippi to you. Bitcoin Graffiti. We're always playing on the Japanese good morning, which is Ohio. So we like to name other states, not let them feel left out. Indeed. Bomatatus, good morning, everyone. Where do I sat? Good morning. We got a morning at Bitcoin Graffiti. Thanks. I love when you guys say good morning in the chat. It's excellent. I love that there's a feeling of community even amongst the folks in the chat who don't see each other, right? Because what we're actually trying to do is just have coffee together, talk about the news, and not bother with anything else, right? We don't want to read the news. That's really boring. And we don't want it coming from weird doom scrolling or anything like that, right? So this is what we're into. Now you can see, right, before we get to the news, you can see we got a lot of sun, so there's no emergency there, right? The sun came up this morning. We're doing great. Bitcoin is running as well, so all is right. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. We have a Max mentioning that he's got a Yorkshire tea, hot and sweet. You can drink whatever you'd like, right? I like coffee. You can have whatever you want, right? I put a tiny little bit of milk in my coffee, just a little bit, just a tiny little bit. All right, so I know what you're all waiting for. You're waiting for the fakest news of the day. It's Moscow time. Yesterday, the Moscow Times, which is a newspaper, was actually trending, right? I don't know what they said. It's probably banned. I don't know, but I just thought it was funny. Moscow Time was actually trending yesterday. This story comes to us from our really, really, really stupid friends in Canada, right? The CBC it's got to be one of the worst. So now if you can keep up, if anyone is out there actually reading the CBC, I'm going to help you. You're going to wonder why when you're reading things about Pride, it's the last day of Pride. Yay. You're going to see the following. Okay. So there's no more so CBC is changing. So this is just a little tip. If you read the CBC, okay, I'm going to help you right now. I'm going to help you read the CBC because you're going to be like, what's going on? What did they do? Because it turns out the CBC is changing the so before they were using LGBTQIA2S plus. We're very pro LGBTQIA2S plus. But now in the CBC, they're going to change it. All right. So here, ready? From now on, it's going to be 2STNBGC. So we're 2STNBGC. I don't know what. So there you go. So if anyone out there is reading the CBC, now you know, right? Don't say, oh, what is 2STNBCGC? You'll be a racist. Okay, so don't do that. Now you know. I told you. Now you know. No more LGBTQ plus. So this one's really fun. So it turns out Bloomberg, right, says they're checking out the markets. This is from Bloomberg Markets. Shoplifters and student debt are a toxic mix for retail stocks, right? So that's what they're saying. And analysts are warning that resuming student loan payments and theft losses will be a problem. So keep that in your head, right? This is from Bloomberg, right? So imagine Bloomberg's printed a newspaper, right? Imagine they printed a newspaper, okay? Now, turn the page, Bloomberg, right? So the first one is markets, shoplifters are a toxic mix for retail stocks. Turn the page, right? So this is the next page of Bloomberg. This is from Bloomberg Business. Headline, retailers aren't abandoning downtowns because of crime. The same day. Here's the little tweet that came with it. You think crime is driving retails like Nordstrom and Walmart out of downtowns? The real reasons are much more business-like, right? So it's a toxic mix, but not, right? It's not. So there you go. Now this is also really pretty fun. right? Pretty fun. So we got to go back. We got to do a few headlines here. We got to do a few headlines. It's not that simple, right? We got to do a few. So it starts with 2020, right? This is from CNN Health. 750 million genetically engineered mosquitoes approved for release in the Florida Keys. Oh, thanks for the news, CNN. Okay, let's keep going. CBS News, just the same day. This was in 2020, August 20th, 2020. EPA approves release of genetically engineered mosquitoes in Texas next year. So we got them in Florida. We got them in Texas. They're approved the same day. Then fast forward a little bit longer, right? That BioNTech starts a human trial to test the malaria vaccine, right? So that was in 2022. Oh, hold on. This is from this morning. First U.S. malaria cases diagnosed in decades in Florida and Texas. Whoops. Wonder what happened there. We don't know. No one could know. It's just a bit of fake news. I have no idea what happened, right? Nobody knows. No one knows. Are the mosquitoes now giving us malaria? We don't know. Who are you going to ask? We don't know. Here's another one. This is from Associated Press, right? We love the AP. Smoke from Canada wildfires increasing health risks in Black and poorer communities in the U.S., right? Because it's going over everyone else. It's different air, right? Or maybe it's not going into colleges. This racist air. And so if it's not going into colleges, are there affirmative action implications here? Because that was the other big one. Everyone, of course, in America, if you're not from America, this next section might be a little boring to you, but it's important. Because we're going to talk about it. There's all kinds of implications for Bitcoin, and it is this affirmative action. So there is a bit of fake news to start. It's the New York Times. Breaking news: the Supreme Court rejected affirmative action at Harvard and UNC. The major ruling curtails race-conscious college admissions in the U.S., all but ensuring that elite institutions become whiter and more Asian and less Black and Latino. So quite a headline. So if any of you don't know, what happened was a couple of years ago, a couple of Asian families noticed that they were getting rejected from elite universities in America, even though their scores were really, really high. And they started looking into it. What's going on here, right? And they found out that the affirmative action stuff in American colleges were targeting Asian Americans. So it wasn't the white versus Black thing. It was Asians that were getting affected. So the numbers that we see today, now unverified, I've seen these float around the internet. Okay, they've just been floating around the internet. But I will give you a few points to keep you from falling into any fake news here. So first of all, Tim Young, who I like, right? Tim runs his mouth. And these numbers I'm about to read have been shared widely. So you'll see them everywhere, right? So it says, this is Harvard's admissions rates based on race. Asians, 12.7%. Whites, 15.3%. Hispanics, 31.3%. And Blacks, 56.1%, right? So what they're saying here, right, is that 56% of Black students who apply to Harvard get in, right? 31% of Hispanics who apply to Harvard get in. 15% of white people who apply to Harvard get in. And 13% of Asian folks who apply to Harvard get in. So what happened is a lot of these Asian folks were the most discriminated against, right? The success rate of application is the lowest. Now, this has nothing to do with affirmative action. I just want to give you one tip because it's part of cognitive dissonance and it happens everywhere and it's part of fake news, all right? Any number that you're given that's a percentage, that's some form of data point, if they don't give you the complete data set, right? They don't give you the complete data set. This here, the success rate has relevancy, but how many Black students are actually applying, right? It's the total amounts. What are the total amounts of kids getting into these schools is a much, you wouldn't want to separate those two data points is what I'm saying, right? Keeping the data point of success rate alone doesn't really give you the whole story, right? It just doesn't give you the same story with the same scores. Yeah. So I see Daniel saying here with the same scores. So the data that I'm reading is just in general. They don't get into the scores, right? But the point here is that you're not actually being shown the whole story when you're just seeing success rate, right? Part of the story is, do you even think that the same number of applicants are African American versus Asian? Is that what you think? Right? Like, how many Black kids are applying to Harvard versus how many Asian kids are applying to Harvard? I bet you the number, I don't have them. We've been misled. The numbers are not here. We don't see them. Right? Has anyone seen those numbers? Has anyone seen the context of these success rates? I don't think so. Right? I think you're just getting raw numbers because they look really bad. Right? They make it look like there's half the students in Harvard are Black. They're not. They're not even close. There's very few. Right? Still to this day, very few. Now, I'm not here to defend affirmative action in any way, shape, or form. I'm against affirmative action in the sense that I would agree with affirmative action for several decades, right? It's happened. And I don't think I would have been against affirmative action in the 1960s and the 1970s. I think I would understand why people would want to do it, right? I think so anyway. And I would say that you've got to continue to ask the question, well, this is to fix an improper calibration in the past. But if that's the goal of it, of course, you have to think about when you turn it down, when you sunset it, right? Like, at what point is it not fixing things in the past, and at what point is it creating new problems? And that's sort of where I see ourselves right now, right? When I think of the real stresses that we're living in the modern era, I mostly blame colleges, right? So if you go back to the end of World War II, or go back to the context of World War II. What's going on in World War II? There's three major political philosophies that are fighting. There's communism, there's fascism, and there's liberalism. Now, liberalism at the time was already wearing the embarrassing clown makeup of World War I, right? The world believed liberalism led us to World War I. And so going into World War II, there was a reason why people liked fascism. There was a reason why people liked communism. And liberalism was still defending its track record, right? So when we get out of World War II, liberalism, of course, wins again, right? The whole world gets together. They push fascism is seen as the absolute worst because there is a sort of religious connection to them. Liberalism's big weakness, of course, was always that there was no religious motivation, right? It was just like, you can be free, you do this, you do that. And it was really just about personal freedoms and not really about a unifying theory. Of course, Christianity was a part of it, but it couldn't embrace the religion of Christianity so wholly because that would be illiberal, right? So it can only keep Christianity at sort of arm's length within its own philosophy because it had spent hundreds of years already carving out its niche as a subtraction or as something that had an air wall or a gap between Christianity. Of course, that's where liberalism came from, right? It came from the separation of church and state and what you're going to do with a state and what should it help promote and these kinds of things. So what ends up happening, though, when this war ends is that liberalism's weakness, right? Its weakness of not having any political order or religion that goes inside of it, right? It's just a sort of really loose collection of ideas and principles. What ends up happening is the universities themselves end up modifying, for the most part, liberalism, and they turn it into the managerial class revolution which we live in now. When we look at liberalism, it has nothing to do with liberalism anymore. What you think of as modern day liberalism is really an amalgamation of all three of those political philosophies that existed in World War II. You're getting a bit of communism, a bit of fascism, and a bit of liberalism, all cloaked in liberalism. But really what you're getting is the managerial revolution, which is what we've been dealing with forever, which was predicated on university degrees and the credentialism that came out of college. The whole battle plan from then on became which school did you go to, which degree did you get, and how much credentialism will that get you going forward. And it created the blueprint for most people. Now, as someone who came, from Quebec, I'm from this East Coast world, right? I was sure that getting a good education as a young person was the only path, right? Because that's more or less how you're brought up. You go to school, I went to all kinds of fancy colleges, right? And was certain I was on the right path. It wasn't until I got to Bitcoin that I realized I was a financial illiterate from going to college. I had no concept of making money, even though I worked in the Senate Banking Committee in Canada only because of credentialism, right? I had gone to a good law school and had a really good resume and all of that stuff, right? And I went to all of these fancy schools in Europe and Canada and here and there. But afterwards, I became a teacher. Before I went to law school, while I was at law school, I was also a teacher. So I took a great interest in education and all of these things, right? And I even tried to create a college in my area here in the Eastern Townships because I was already starting to learn about the limitations of education to begin with, right? I wanted an experiential college that helped people put on events. There was nothing fancy and esoteric or academic about it, right? It was like, let's put on physical events and the kids will learn this and that and practically have their hands on things. So I gave a couple college lectures in my life. I gave a Federalist constitutional lecture at the University of Kyoto while I was a lawyer in Japan. When I first moved to New York City, I gave a lecture not unlike some of the stuff we talk about here, to the Columbia University the Columbia University joint MBA and law degree. So there's a joint MBA law degree, which they offer at Columbia University. That's one class. I went and gave them a lecture, a 2-hour lecture on what Bitcoin meant and cryptography meant and where we were headed and all that kind of stuff. So I have some experience in these worlds, right? I was a high school teacher, I'm an elementary school teacher in South Korea. I taught little kids. So I've been in the education field for a long time, right? And what I noticed after all of this, when I think of the actual problems that are in today, when I think of the mutation of the liberal mindset, because I continue to classify myself as a classical liberal, as someone who does believe in a lot of these liberal ideas. Now, I don't believe in modern liberalism. I'm a liberal who loved Donald Trump, for example, for all of his liberal attitudes, right? And in some ways, that's why a lot of classical liberals had to become conservatives, because conservatism became, let's not change things from where we went before. In fact, conservatism became really the bulwark against the managerial class. It's where liberals went for refuge. Real classical liberals went for refuge against the managerial class. Now, what is the managerial class? As I said, it's the combination of fascism, communism, and liberalism all into one, where there is a philosophy, right? There is now a religion. And that's why you see all these kinds of people saying, oh, LGBTQ plus and the flag and all of this, seeing the world through race and seeing everything through that prism of skin color. That's part of this religion, right? Class warfare is a big part of this religion. They took that from the communists, right? Eat the rich. They took the discipline and structure and wordsmithing. So the thing about both the communists and the fascists, they were really excellent at manipulating language. It's always been a really important facet of those systems. Liberalism wasn't really that, it was about seeking the truth. So it wasn't really about manipulation of language. That came in from the other systems. And that's how it took over liberalism. And that's how it took over the word liberalism, right? And I continue to put the responsibility for this failure at the door of universities. And for many years now, I have completely given up on the capacity for universities and colleges to do anything useful. And in fact, believe that their time in the world is over. They're irredeemable, right? Irredeemable. And I'll get to where I think they're headed and what we have left to get out of them that I think is useful. The one last thing they can do for us. But here's what Bitcoiners have learned over the past few years, right? First of all, credentialism isn't going to work, and building this entire managerial system out of the credentialism that university put into place is already lost, right? This is what happens in the Bitcoin world. If you come to a Bitcoin operation, if you come to if you come to a major exchange, if you come to any one of these things and you say, oh, I went to Harvard, give me a job, they're going to punch you in the face. They don't care. No one cares. They want to know why you went to college when you could have made money. What were you thinking? Like, why did you go to college to like get permission to make money or something? So it doesn't work. It already doesn't work in our industry. Now, furthermore, as someone who programs events, right, that's kind of where I found a bit of a niche and a role in the industry, and it's been going back years now. So I help program CoinDesk's original event, Consensus, and we help build that up. And I program Bitcoin Magazine's major Bitcoin event, the biggest in the world, right? So the thing that I've been designing for years, and the thing that I'll say, not for marketing and not to the public and not, oh, come to the show because it's like this. The thing that I say internally and the thing that we organize around and the thing that we build, right, when we're doing all of these planning sessions and really just getting the direction of what events are. I've been saying for many, many years that we're here to take over the failure of college. Remember what I said, I didn't know anything, zero. I knew nothing. And I had all the fancy degrees, right? All of them. I knew nothing about finance, zero. I was a financial illiterate, a stupid Canadian credentialist, financial illiterate, right? And Bitcoin, of course, forces you to open your eyes. Now, I knew about who Milton Friedman was and Hayek. I'd read all that stuff in college. But I thought it was like a real debate, are you Keynesian or Friedman, which are you? But there's no debate. Once you become financially literate, you realize the binary itself is a trap, right? So for a long time, the orientation of what I program for events is to take up the actual void left by colleges. And that's where Bitcoin meetups have become so relevant, right? If you talk to almost any person who graduates from college that has an economics degree, they're usually blind to what they don't know, right? So I remember when I was in Russia many years ago, I met a girl studying economics, and she was like really sad. She knew she was getting a shit education, and she went to the most famous Moscow University in Moscow. And she would say, we only learn Marx. We read Das Kapital. That's it. I have no access to any of this other information. We don't get it. And it made me think, well, it's almost the same in our system. Like, how is it that people who go through all of this learning never become financially literate? Like, how are there so many stupid economists in our system as well? And it took me a long time to sort of figure it out. But that's what Bitcoin events are really there for. When I say, we plan these events, what I'm really thinking of, that's why the side parties and the activities and the socializing and the networking is so important, because over 4 days, what you're really getting is a full university year experience condensed into this small amount of time, which is way cheaper, way more fun, way more impactful as far as what you're learning. There's no tests, there's none of that stuff. Bitcoin meetups are an even better, right? The event itself just builds off of the meetup culture. When Satoshi wrote about a P2P electronic cash network, not a lot of people understood that it meant a network that would even go into a physical world where meetups would be the main propagating force behind Bitcoin. And those meetups are actually the model for where education is headed. Bitcoiners have already written the book on how to push this forward. Now, there's been people that say for a long time, so one of the things that I learned, and I was just talking to him 2 days ago, Isaiah Jackson, great friend of mine. He wrote the book Bitcoin and Black America. His family came down and stayed with me in Barbados. I'll be talking to Justin Rednick right after this call. He's the guy who wrote the book From Bars to Bitcoin. He was in jail and then found Bitcoin and is sort of he's Bitcoin vegan is his other name. Super cool guy. And the point is that Bitcoiners, so one of the things when the George Floyd thing happened, for example, right? At the time, that was 2020, I used to go to fake news all the time. I'd go on the fake news, right? I was the guy who would go on the fake news because Bitcoin was in the news. Price up, price down, hack. Mostly that, right? Price up, price down, hack. I got a call, usually once a week, and I would go on CNN or Fox or CNBC or one of these other fake news outlets. I always had a bit of fun with it. I'd always, like try to make it entertaining for folks. And I still did, for example, when Warren Buffett called it rat poison, I said, he's right. He's poisoning the banks. So I would have fun with it. But this time they called when the George Floyd thing was happening, and they're like, do you want to come on and talk about Bitcoin? And I was like, no, this is a trap. This is a scam, right? Like, there's no way I can win this. Like, this is just going to be, why aren't the tech bros doing more for Black people? And I was like, well, I'm not going into that, right? But then I had to ask myself, like, well, but who should go? And I didn't know. And I was a little, George Floyd thing did, I think, force many people, as crazy as it was and unjustified as it was, in some ways, it did force a lot of people to stop and actually ask some questions. And I stopped and I said, it is a little weird that I don't know who could actually manage the talking points about Bitcoin and George Floyd and Black. That is a blind spot that I had to fix. So I quickly went to figure it out and started looking at who could handle that question in a way that I thought was the right way to go. And that's how I found Isaiah Jackson. And what I found out was not, first of all, I didn't know about the Black Wall Streets. That's a true story. White people used to burn down Black Wall Street so that they couldn't create circular economies. That's how the book starts. Really awful stuff, right? Awful stuff. And what I started to realize, and one of the things that I thought was so useful when I started to talk to Isaiah, is he had probably the greatest answer to anyone in this time about what more Bitcoiners can do. Because truthfully, right, you don't want to be defensive, but here's how he handles it. And this is why I think Bitcoiners have solved the education problem and are really will be able to move the conversation forward so much. So here's what it looks like, right? So Isaiah, you got to say he's a Black guy, right? So he would go on these shows. First of all, he'd be talking about Thomas Sowell. I was able to book him on all kinds of shows after. Like, I was like, oh, the BBC wants to talk to you. There you go, right? Go do that one. I'm not doing any of them, right? You get them all. So what Isaiah would do why don't Black people have more sway in Bitcoin? And he has the best answer, and I can't give this answer, right? He would say, what are you talking about? Like, there's some of the most important developers are Black. Like, the richest, most successful guy and the best writer in the industry, Arthur Hayes, is Black, right? There's roast beef, beauty on. There's like a million amazing people that have been around forever. And so he would always turn that question, like, well, why are you racist for not recognizing the contributions that have already been made? And if you ask yourself, well, what are Black people population-wise in the United States? 10%, right? Well, the contribution already to Bitcoin from the Black community is way greater than 10%. It's way greater, right? So they're already disproportionately successful in Bitcoin. Already disproportionately successful. And I don't imagine that's going to stop, right? I continue to look at Africa and its uptake on Bitcoin much higher because, again, what we talk about a lot here is the managerial class's arrogance, and what they've done to the system has created a blind spot where a lot of people don't really know that their degrees aren't worth anything, and they are financially illiterate, and they continue to have trust in the top-down structure of the managerial system. And that's what's misled them to the point where they think some boomer with an idea and some charisma is going to be able to fix the money system, right? Yay. It ain't going to work, right? So what advantage a lot of Black people have in America comes from what Isaiah mentioned in his book, Bitcoin and Black America. Black national identity in America isn't predicated on the success of the dollar. They feel out of that system. They have a lot more to be proud of, a real culture that isn't about the US dollar that they can be proud of. Now, we know all kinds of Black people, like white people, love money. They love the US dollar, right? All about the Benjamins. And I think even the nickname Benjamins is from the African-American lexicon, let's say. I'm not sure about that, but it seems like it comes from some rap lyrics. all of that said, right, I simply think education itself, now this whole affirmative action thing's got everyone all excited in America. Oh, more people are going to get fair meritocratic access to college. Yeah, okay. But guess what? The whole thing doesn't work. The whole thing is coming down. The whole idea of higher education in the context of, just look what we heard, the student loans, the financial incentives, it's all broken. And what do colleges actually do these days? The goal for me as a Bitcoiner, for my children, is that they never go to college, ever, right? That's my goal. If they go to college in some way, it's because something didn't catch, right? Now, because I homeschool them, because I use none of the inherited systems to educate my kids, I use really a Bitcoin model, right? Very involved parenting, try to get them involved in as many Bitcoin community things as I can, and lots of private lessons here and there, but it's a master apprentice relationship. And that's what Bitcoin has started to model for the whole world, that you can actually, the medieval education roots of what we think of as Western universities is very different from what we've been given. This big class with a lecturer, that has nothing to do with the original Oxford. Do you know what Oxford really is? If you're like what Bill Clinton got with the Rhodes Scholarship, you think he went to like classes? No. The real Oxford looks like this. You put the academic gown on and you walk around campus with your professor and you talk. He gives you some assignments, read this, read that, and you walk around and talk. It's one-on-one. It's master and apprentice. It always was. The Germans still do that system, master and apprentice, but it's become more technical and more vocational. But it used to be applied as well in the liberal arts. It used to be applied to, philosophy and mathematics. And if you go back even further to early medieval times, before the colleges were even created, that's actually how you made your career. What you did was you just copied entirely. You copied the life of someone who came before you, whose life you admired, which was a form of master and apprentice relationship. So, for example, if you wanted to be a poet, you would take a system of poems or a series of poems, a collection of poems from the person you respected, and you would modify them in your own original way. You would limit your ability in some ways to be creative and find creativity within that small niche. And they would do it for their entire lives, right? So there would be people like Chaucer, who wrote the Canterbury Tales, who himself mimicked, I forget who, but he had someone who he copied, right? And that was how he created his art. And that's how this stuff ended up going. So now today you get a lot of people commenting on how it won't even matter, right? So here's what Jonathan Turley says. Jonathan Turley, who is a lawyer and a really smart guy. If you don't follow Jonathan Turley, I recommend it. So here's what he says about the affirmative action stuff. He says, the New York Times tweeted that the decisions barely racial discrimination in the admission is all but ensuring that elite institutions become whiter and more Asian and less Black and Latino. And he says, I expect that colleges and universities are already working on the circumvention of the decision. They can use essays to identify race, even encouraging students to share any struggles with discrimination. There is also a move to eliminate standardized tests, which will make the future challenges more difficult, right? And of course, you've already got the White House weighing in saying, oh, no, you can't do this, right? It's terrible. So bad. Now, this morning, here's the statement from, this is Joel Pollack on Biden and everyone else in the White House with regards to this Supreme Court decision. So they're asked, the press on Air Force One was asking if he would back the radical changes to affirmative action, and so these are the media who attack those who doubt elections, now suggesting that the executive branch doesn't accept the legitimacy of the court, right? Bizarrely, so that's kind of what's going on, right? Let me just see what this says. Rhodes Scholar level people that never went down the path make some of the best Bitcoiners. Bitcoin itself is the master, therefore there is no master. Yeah, Tommy, that's part of it. Yeah, that's part of it. So let's go. I'm going to get into more of the comments here in a second, guys. So I want to tie it all up, right? So lots of people now commenting on this question about affirmative action, and of course, one of the comments from RFK has gotten a ton of reactions. So RFK came out and said, regarding the Supreme Court banning affirmative action in higher education, I know many Americans feel that purely race-based decisions are unfair. However, this feeling misses important context. The effects of racist policies going back centuries are now self-perpetuating. Affirmative action understands this and uses race-based policies to undo the effects of racist policies. Colorblind admissions tend to favor those who are already in the circle of privilege. It favors those who grew up in affluent, educated households. Wouldn't you like to invite in those who have been left out in the cold? So he's saying something that people have been saying for a long time here. It's very easy to understand, right? Systemic problems require some form of systemic fix. So now a lot of people come and disagree with him, right? So this is from Scott Adams, which I 100% agree with what Scott Adams is saying here, right? If you told, so he's referring to RFK's exact tweet. He's saying, if you hold this view in 2023, you need to pass the how do you explain it to Asian Americans test. Indeed. How do you explain this to Asian Americans, right? How do you do that? Vivek Ramaswamy also saying, I strongly disagree with Robert Kennedy that affirmative action is about letting in those who have been left out in the cold. That's wrong. The majority of Black students at Harvard are not descendants of slaves, but descendants of immigrants. Giving special preferences to someone who looks like a person who once suffered is not justice. We should finally embrace colorblind meritocracy in America rather than repeat our mistakes. I agree with both Scott Adams and Vivek here, right? I think they're right, right? I think they're right. But hold on. But hold on. The game is not about being right. It's not even close. Unfortunately, that's not the game we're playing here, right? We're playing a completely different game. A completely different game. And the game we're playing, you should think of it as 5G warfare, Michael Flynn's thing. But even more, what is the main culprit? Like, where is all of the trouble coming from in the Western world, right? It's actually coming from the colleges. It's actually them, right? I'm not sure they're fixable. So here's the way to think about it, right? Everything these colleges have done as far as connecting communism and fascism and smashing them and squishing them into the liberal bucket and then using the title has given a worldview that it's all about scientific progress. It's all about all the things we've gotten from applying science and driving out the darkness of superstition or religion. But it turns out that the 20th century, based on these ideas, is one of the most superstitious and tokenizing you'll ever find in the world. And one of the interesting things that happened is the following, right? In medieval times, and in a time when people were not so educated from the system, the idea of spirituality, for example, right? Spirituality and demon possession, right? You have demons and you have spirit and you can get possessed. And, it was a very neat and tidy way of seeing the inner world for humans. But what we ended up doing was more or less just replacing the word spirituality with psychology, right? Now, the medieval people didn't believe that there was some ephemeral ghost floating around and it went in your body and then didn't. That's not really what they're talking about. They're talking about your inner feelings, your inner mental dialogue was literally spirituality. It's what you thought inside, right? In the Middle Ages, the ideas that were spiritual are what we would call psychological today, right? They were parallel. The things that the psychological world ran parallel to the physical world, in the same way that the spiritual world runs parallel to the physical world. And when we think of the psychological afflictions of loneliness, of social breakdown, well, that was what the ancients understood happened when you had idle hands, and society itself, the psychology of the society itself, was not stable. The community psychology, the collective psychology was not stable. It would invite boredoms and misbehavior at a very deep level, which they called demons, which we today call mental illness, right? But the spiritual component was simply replaced with technical words and a very surgical way of thinking about it, right? But it wasn't true. The truth was lost, and it turned it into something very sterile. Now, go back to what I just said about what Vivek and Scott Adams said about Biden, about RFK. They're right. It's true. It would be better for America to be in a meritocratic position. But what are we fighting over? We're fighting over a completely lost battlefield. There is no fixing college. It is wasted. You're not going to get like a little bit of reform. This sucker needs to go down, and hard, right? The entire overthrow of the liberal world happened through those institutions. They are beyond salvaging. There is no room for them anymore. They don't provide anything. And I think that the vacuum will be supplanted with the simultaneous collapse, for example, of Hollywood, right? So where's all that Hollywood money going to go? So this weekend, for example, we got Indiana Jones 5. It's going to be the biggest financial loser in the history of cinema ever. There's never going to be a movie that lost more money than Indiana Jones 5. And this comes on the string of Disney failing several times, right? This is several movies in a row. And suddenly Disney itself has like major financial problems. And it's just one Hollywood studio. The strike is happening right now. Now, for a while, when people ask me about events and where's it all going to head, because people in 2022, for example, when they saw how big the event has gotten, and everyone was celebrating, less this year, but in 2022, people would ask me, where's this going, man? Like, how did you ever think it was going to get this big, right? Because remember, when I started doing these events, the biggest in the world were still sub 1,000 people. Like, we were still a sub 1,000 people. The biggest Bitcoin and crypto conferences were not much bigger than some meetups when we started, right? And so to watch it go from 2015, when it was sub 1,000 people, to 2022, 7 years, and you're at 30,000 people, right? Like, it's a totally different ballpark. And so people would ask me, where's this headed, and how much bigger can it actually get? Do you expect it to fall? Are you going to plan? And I would say, look, I think we're taking over for both college failure and the failure of Hollywood. And I think in the end, we're going to get both of those budgets. I think we're going to get both of those. They can get much bigger. And if you think about 5G education and the ability for the best teacher now to share their lessons with every student, I just don't see a path forward for colleges that's worth fighting over. Now, I get why you're going to want some form of higher education that is there, that will still be the inheritor. Like, I don't think it's going to be erased from the planet, but it's going to change heavily. And when I sit back and I say, well, we've got to think strategically right now, and we got to think about what we're willing to fight for and what hills we're going to die on, and all of these things. I go back to the 5G warfare perspective that General Flynn shares, and the 5G warfare principle. Let me just see my notes. Did I really not? Yeah, okay, I got it. Now, the 5G warfare thing is all about dividing and conquering. So here's what General Flynn. So remember, in warfare, what you should do, right? What you should do is, if a field is lost, you get out of there. You don't fight for lost ground. If I was really, truly, and someone was trying to really win the war in Ukraine, like the Donbass and all that, there's not much point anymore. This is pretty lost, right? What you got to do is know when a field of battle is lost, and you don't bother with it, right? There's other fields to win and other battles to win. So this is more or less what General Flynn did when he himself was caught up in the Trump-Russia collusion thing. That's why he pled guilty, right? That's called retreating from a battlefield when you know all is lost. You'll regroup and find a way to win ultimately, but that's what you do. So here's what he says about Robert Kennedy, right? And he says this about Robert Kennedy because now remember 2 days ago we were talking about Kennedy starting to do all of these um, town halls. And he did one the other day that was so effective and so powerful. He just hit on every single point. And you notice a theme, right? So they tried to get him on vaccines. He cleaned it up, right? It's about making them safe, right? It's a perfect answer. So then they went after him on Trump. Trump speaks nicely of you, right? And they went after him. What do you think about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's drug abuse, right? So they went with both of those things. And what did he say in both cases? I'm not going to criticize individuals. I love that Trump thinks I'm great. And I think, you know, Trump has these skills and thank you, Trump, right? I want to bring Americans together. And he said the same about Biden, right? You know, I'm running against him. I don't think he's up for leading. But, you know, I don't want to talk about the drugs and Hunter and all that. I'm here to bring Americans together. So General Flynn said the following about Kennedy's own defense of Trump, right? So this is what he says. Robert Kennedy scares the hell out of the DNC because he seeks to unify all Americans and clearly demonstrates the intellect and leadership to do so. Between he and Donald Trump, who scares the hell out of the GOP, I agree with their common message that we better get America back on track of being a great nation once again, where respect returns to those running our nation, especially respect for the highest office in our land, or we're finished. So what he says here, he goes on to say that we are in a 5G warfare situation. Where did I have that? Did I not bring it? Just give me 1 second, team. I'm positive I had a 5G warfare quote from him here somewhere. I'm missing it right now, but I need it. It's important. Well, that's what I got. So the whole point of 5G warfare is to divide people, right? Where did he put that quote? Well, anyway, the point of 5G warfare is to get neighbor to fight neighbor. It is to get everyone in America fighting each other. And the formula that I've seen RFK deploy is probably the only winning strategy, right? Which is to take the moral high ground on every one of these debates. So the Hunter Biden thing, moral high ground, right? He goes to the Trump thing, right? Won't criticize him, moral high ground. Now, this education thing is not exactly the moral high ground, right? It's not exactly the moral high ground because indeed, as Scott Adams said, how do you explain it to the Asian folks that want meritocracy? But his real concern is winning, right? Really. And you've got to think in terms of what the best strategy is to take the moral high ground to win. Now, on the same day that he came out and is getting torched, right? Sticks, Hex, and Hammer says Kennedy is over. It's done, right? His campaign is done because he supported this thing. Vivek disagreeing, lots of people disagreeing with him, right? Lots of people saying he's only actually good to get you to talk about things. He's a good foil. He can't win. On the same day that this happened, right? Michelle Obama, for example, came out and said, oh, we need affirmative action. It's the only thing that will save America and blah, 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 blah. Now, again, I go back to the argument that the universities are a lost battlefield. They have to be completely reimagined. Affirmative action isn't even the beginning of what has to happen. I imagine what happens with universities in the end will be what the last little thread of what they're good for is to maybe give people who had terrible parents, no one looking out for their education, no one in their community when they are young helping them, and they have a second chance. Or immigrants that worked really hard and want to have some it's more or less the only thing that's left at being successful is orienting people into Western world, but it ends up screwing them up anyway because it gives them so much crazy information and lies. So again, I think it's a lost battleground, and there's not much we can get out of it, even if we squeeze it even harder. And Bitcoin has already created the education framework that will dominate going forward. So it's kind of yesterday's debate. I get why people are angry about it. I just don't think it makes any difference. And I get why people are upset with RFK and what he said. But in my opinion, he's got, maybe he even believes that. He's shown that he's got sort of some elasticity and can change his mind on these issues. But anyway, I think his main concern is don't even open that up as an attack vector, right? Because it's useless. You can't win the fight. Why should he have to debate Michelle Obama, which might be what happens, by the way, right? Like, I don't imagine Biden is going to make it. That's just me. So if he ends up having to debate Michelle Obama, you don't want this on him. And his story here is pretty sensible, but I think it's got problems. So the managerial class debate, right? I think in the end will help, at the end of World War III, help a complete overhaul of our college system. I don't think affirmative action is even the beginning of how much change is coming for those institutions. So Supreme Court, totally within its right to do it. I get the argument, but I have no problem sort of sidelining the argument in order to win this election. So that's where I think. Tell me what you guys think. So let me see what's going on. Let's see where we are. I missed a lot of these. I actually love that name. So we're talking about Moscow Time University. Yeah. What do you expect from Moscow Time University? It would be a good school. I always thought we were living. Yeah, Diesel. It was a feeling I think a lot of us had. I agree. Bitcoin, Diesel. It was all about. I was a complete illiterate. I say it all the time. We don't realize we are still in the prescient stage with many subjects, psychologically, economics, etc. We are not as advanced as we think. No, and that's what I was saying. We have never suffered more from the afflictions that the education revolution was supposed to have solved. Right? We've never been more like easily persuaded. Let's say. Understanding the current monetary system made me understand Bitcoin. I was the other way around, Diesel. I was the other way around. Understanding Bitcoin helped me understand the current system. I had a feeling about what was wrong with it, but I had no way of articulating it. The contrast. Agreed. We fall into the same traps over and over. Yeah. I never knew the difference between centralized until. Yeah. Donald Trump is pro-Bitcoin. Want to point on this doll where he hurt you? I don't know what you mean, Jay. I love Donald Trump. We love Donald. And liberalism are all the same thing, just with Democrat sprinkles. Well, old liberalism wasn't the same thing. That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? That these things changed it. It became the same thing. Yeah, it did. It did. That's what I'm saying. Through universities. It was the universities who did it. Right. That's, I guess, the point. What I'm saying is you can't turn such an enemy. It would be like saying we're going to make the Federal not keep Bitcoin on its balance sheet. We're going to make the Federal Reserve run Bitcoin. Like it's not going to work. Right. I mean, they can run a node, I guess, but that's not what I mean. That was a bad example. Never mind. I don't know. Education is free now in Europe, but still paying tax for it. Yeah, in Europe. But it's even worse in Europe as far as racism goes. I went to a fancy French school and it was government paid for, it's free. But guess who they let in? The people who did well on the test. Well, guess who that was? What if your children want to study art or math? College provides an avenue for learning that. You, as a father, have no. Well, I do have an art and math are my two subjects, but no. Look, I can imagine my kids asking to go to college if it's a better institution. But right now, like you can give me all kinds of totems about what college is supposed to be. I know what it's about: alcoholism. That's it. There's nothing else happening there, right? Nothing. Like you could say kids are going there to learn. Maybe there was a reason why we had it when the books had to be there and you had to go to the books. I get it, right? But what are you going to do when a 1-minute Bitcoin tutorial, maybe Andreas Antonopoulos does it, or some really great educator does it, and it's better than a 4-year university degree, which is more or less where we're at, right? Now I get you. Master and apprentice is still a thing. I'm not saying there's no education going on. I'm saying the model that Bitcoin perfected, the P2P model, will be more enshrined in more subjects by the time my kids are old enough to do that, that there will be different avenues. And I agree, you want to get, that there'll be a limit to what I can teach them. I agree with you, David. I agree with you. There's a limit to what I can teach them. But I think those opportunities will be there by other means. Won't just be school. If it's school and they have to go, I agree. Right? That's fine. I'm not saying it, but my goal is they don't go. I'm not ashamed to say I am, and I'm any whole coiners here. The world is so inefficient, man. Clout Casino, what's up? And numbers met are lower. Oh, cool. The market must be pumping. The market must be pumping. State colleges are free if you agree not to move out of the state for 3 years. Hunter College is worth its weight in gold. Yeah, there's most of the state schools are pretty similar, right? Free if you are from the state. Roads. Oh yeah, we read that one. But I hope you. Yeah, look, I could be wrong about this, guys. 100%. I just think it is a, for me personally, if I was a general in World War III, right? Imagine I'm a general in World War III. I'm not putting any weight on colleges to like win that battlefront. I'm abdicating it. I'm letting it go, right? Don't want it. Don't even want it, right? Yeah. Being an apprentice of Bitcoin. Yeah, there you go. The master. I hated affirmative action. It was basically it's super racist, Clout. It's super racist. They basically had minorities get into admin offices. Well, that's a different story. So the work one, and now that it's headed there, I'm more interested in that one, the work one, than I am in the college one, right? I think colleges can actually remediate. Like I said, I think the way they survive is on being a social force to help families that just couldn't do the job with their kids. So that's where I see it headed. Does RFK mean that Bitcoiners will lean Democrat in the next election? I think it's exactly what Michael Flynn said. The most damaging thing for Democrats is RFK. So will they lean Democrat? Will Bitcoiners lean Democrat to put the knife in? I would, right? That was the appeal to Trump. The appeal of Trump originally was that he was going to destroy the Republican Party. Never forget that, right? And it's important to understand why people like me love Donald Trump. We love him, right? It's love. It's actual love. Because he destroyed the Bushes and Jeb Bush, and we didn't think that could be done, right? And there were people who were more interested in winning because we understood the whole system was corrupted, that were more interested in winning the Republican Party first before anything else, because that was the battlefront at the time. And so those people like myself will never stop loving Donald Trump for that act alone. But I think RFK can do the same for Democrats. I think he can. So if you say lean in, yeah, lean in to stab them. Yeah, kill the beasts, right? Metaphorically, of course. So will Bitcoiners lean in? Yeah, with the knife point out, right? With the knife point out. So I think if they can do it, the Republican Party is already dispatched. Trump has already destroyed it, right? It's finished. Whatever's left of it is just a fight. And I don't think the liars are going to be able to pick up the pieces. Trump will make sure of it, right? So in the same way that Trump was deadly to Republicans, RFK is deadly for Democrats. Deadly. It's they can't survive him. They can't survive him. He's too good at what he's doing. I have a friend at Columbia University who's working on a mathematical proof of superstring theory, convenes with other mathematicians around the world and publishes his progress for critique. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not trying to say it gets obliterated. I think it survives, but it's got to be burned to the core and then grow back. So in what form it grows back, I don't know. I don't know in what form it grows back. I'm not trying to say that. How about this? This is what I'm trying to say. The normal NPC don't have to think your plan in life is this situation, which I lament because I absorbed it as well, is go to college and then you get a job, right? Credentialism. I don't think that's going to be the main route for most people anymore. I think we're going to move to, for the most part, a master apprentice situation. And colleges will go back to what they were a few hundred years ago for a group of people who are interested in information for information's sake, knowledge for knowledge's sake, science for science sake, and all of this interesting stuff, superstring theory, mathematical proof. I think there's still going to be a venue for that, right? I still think there is going to be a venue for that. It's just not going to be the thing that I'm talking about here is not these high performing parts of education. Like I get you might want to go to some place for brain surgery, or maybe not. Maybe the robots will do it. I don't know. It's the idea that everyone has to go, right? That's just what you do reflexively. And it's this thing about getting a liberal arts BA, right? Like, I don't really know, right? Now I get why some scientists labs and all that stuff. I get it, right? So I'm not saying it goes to nothing. I'm just saying Bitcoiners have already modeled how the majority of people should be educated, the system that they should be educated by, not necessarily the information, the system, the P2P model, smaller meetups, incentivized by your own motivation, right? Everyone who comes to a Bitcoin meetup, it's because they chose it, right? Much easier to teach someone who chose it themselves. So there you go. In some higher schools, some racist groups, minorities of a specific religious group were dominating the higher colleges with money and ruin. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, that could be. He couldn't do this in a vacuum. I hear what you're saying, David. I hear what you're saying. The current education system has brainwashed us all. It all depends on what part of the world you live in. That's true. Yeah. College is a horrible racket. Yeah, education, industrial complex type shit. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't want to name the religion, but they have unmasked a racial supremacy ideology. Yeah, I've seen that stuff. Clout, I've seen it. Governments will educate you depending on their agendas. Absolutely. Public education was a priority for the National Socialists. A priority, right? There's a reason. To make a generalization that colleges should collapse is intellectually dishonest. Well, I don't know about dishonest. The money situation will help them collapse on their own. I don't think they're making it out of this decade. I mean, they're in such bad financial positions because of the very thing they did with the managerial class. They imported it to themselves. That's why you have so many gender equity advisors. They just created more jobs, not for educators, right? So even if it is just a collapse of their corporate structure and it gives more money to the actual frontline professors and educators. Because go ask the professors how it's going. Go ask them, right? They're going to tell you it's a scam and it's falling apart and they don't get any money and they get paid shit. And it's all the diversity administrators that are making all the money in the colleges. So I don't think it's a generalization. I'm prepared to make a prediction that colleges don't make it out. Like a bunch of them are going to go bankrupt. If you removed Chinese students today, foreign students, it's already over. Not going to make it, right? So I think some colleges would make it, but the vast majority are gone. How many are already closing? Have you seen the numbers on that? It's bad. It's bad. Here in New England, we hear about it all the time. Colleges closing, right? There's a bunch of towns between me and New York City that their only business is the local college, and the local college is closing. Private colleges, right? Not the state ones, but it's happening everywhere. So I don't think it's intellectually dishonest, David. I think it's happening, and the finances of it itself are going to make it happen, right? They sold people on a scam. So I just can't see it going forward. I just can't. Bitcoin movies are going to be really cringe, though. I don't mean there's necessarily going to be Bitcoin movies. Here's what I see. Like, do you know Batman, for example, is coming off trademark in like 10 years? Like anyone can make a Batman movie in 10 years. Anybody, anyone. So maybe 15 or something like that. But I already saw, like on Satoshi Wedding Murders, my graphic novel book, the first chapter. The other ones are coming, guys. I just got a couple little things. I can imagine with AI and all this technology in 10 years that a single person is going to be able to produce an excellent Batman movie. I saw someone did it with Star Wars already the other day. They did their own AI version where it was just pictures and you can the story is being narrated and it turns the page, and exactly like my story was. So I imagine it's not so much Bitcoin movies that I'm talking about. It's the smaller production and just a different scale. The scale is changing. And that scale for high production quality and these other things, I think, goes towards education. So it's not going to be like Bitcoin narratives necessarily. It's going to be stuff that will have good energy and attraction. All right. Why are most Bitcoiners the biggest voice crony capitalists? Because they have the most money. Bitcoin is neutral. Bitcoin should appeal to Marxists. I think it does. Educate yourself, people. Find the truth. Don't believe. Yeah, I agree. Companies like FTX, Grayscale, Citadel, and BlockFi, all companies without risk management teams that have made the Bitcoin space sleazy and less trustworthy. Yeah, but there'll always be people like that in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is for everyone, even the crooks and the criminals, right? Even the crooks and the criminals. Alex Jones wants RFK as a Trump VP if the Democrats exclude him. I'm pretty sure Trump is eyeing Tim Scott to split the Black Democratic vote. Yeah, both of those. I think Tim Scott would be an excellent VP candidate or president. I like Tim Scott as president too. I like a lot of these like other people running. I think it's a good sign that these good quality people are out there. And a lot of people want RFK to go Trump VP. I continue to think RFK should be an independent third party candidate as president, and he should get Vivek to be his VP. And I think that ticket, a Democrat Republican ticket, could get both of the parties out of the way. And that's, I think, what a lot of Americans want. Remember, love Trump, love him. I want him to be celebrated for the rest of his life. I want him to go into US stadiums, and I want the whole stadium to cry and cheer for him. And I want him to cry because they love him so much and because he knows they love him. I want all of that, right? But I don't want him for president for 4 more years. What we're doing here, explaining a bit of the mind games around what RFK did, If it's Trump, that's all we're going to do. That's it. That's it. What did he mean? How do you explain the attack? You know, da, 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 da. And then again, I will never forgive Trump ever for his last day in office. I love him. I love him. Love him. But sorry, I don't. Why can't I got Stella Assange to come to Amsterdam? Why can't I get Julian Assange? Why? That's Trump's fault. It's Trump's fault. All right. And I don't forgive him for it. And I don't think he needs to be forgiven for it. He made a choice. I understand what he's up against. People are trying to kill him, his family, all that stuff. I get it. It's hard. Beat it. Go away. We got a guy who's already lost his family, and he's also willing to take a bullet, right? So that's just how I think. I would be, look, if Trump won, and I'd be okay with it, of course. Love him. And I would be so entertained by the meltdown. But I want to get over World War III. I don't want to be, I don't want more, right? I'm ready for hyper Bitcoinization and less fiat dying. So that, you know, that this is the shortest route that I can see. We're still going to get there, but 4 more years of Trump is not simple. Asking, can Trump be RFK's VP? That would be great. No, I've actually thought of that. Trump is too old to want to do the job every day. I think Trump just wants the, I'm mind reading him a bit, but I think he just wants the chance to get back at what happened to him, which I totally agree with. That's what I think, you know. Yeah, so here's Yahim. They are, colleges are communist indoctrination camps, more or less. Managerial class, the managerial class thing. Yeah, that, you know, that's where I'm at. Colleges should be free, paid for by tax dollars. I'm the first person Now, okay, David Hunter, maybe, but I went, for example, right? So I've been to the expensive schools, and I also went to the free school in France, which was one of the fanciest universities in France. And do you know what I saw? So I went to a place called Sciences Po in France. Very, very hard to get in, famous school in France, right? Free, it's free, right? And all of the French students would say to me, oh, you poor North Americans, you pay so much for your school. Ours is free, right? But guess what happens? This is what happens. This is a very simple equation, right? You'll understand it immediately. If it's free, that means the budget is coming from the government, right? From taxes. So it's free from the government. They get the money. Okay, if the school can't actually control the budget, it's just getting a budget, right? It gets its money from the government. It can ask for more, all the normal things, right? But what's the one lever they can control? Seats. How many kids get in? That's it. That's the one thing they can control. If they can't control the money, they can control the seats. And so they control the seats. And they control the seats through standardized testing. And the standardized testing, free, right? Free. But I've never been around such rich kids in my whole life. I've never even come close to seeing that kind of wealth in one place. You know, my life in France was a weekend on the French Riviera. Let's go to my friend's downtown Paris house. Why don't we go to the mountain house and ski with this other friend? His family's not there. It's 30 bedrooms. Let's go sleep there and ski for a couple of days. Now, and they would sit around having their whole education paid for by factory workers and taxpayers. And it made no sense. College, for our generation, should have been seen for what it was, a tax on the rich who are sending their kids anyway. Tuition is a tax on the rich. That's it. It's just a direct tax on rich people who are going to send their kids to school anyway. And when you say it should all be from the government, what you're actually saying is, well, then the schools shouldn't be in charge of their budgets. They're only going to be in charge of the seats. And the seats will be indeed meritocratic. They are entirely meritocratic in France. It's 100% meritocratic. Would people like the results? Do you know what you see? You want to know what you see? I'll tell you what you see. You see weekends in the Alps, weekends in the French Mediterranean, weekends in Paris, weekends anywhere you feel like. It doesn't, who cares? Everyone's so rich. There's like 200 students in the whole school, and they're all loaded. All of them. Maybe 1 or 2. I remember meeting some kid from I forget where, he wasn't white, and he had to work his ass off to get in there. Great, he earned it. Awesome. But the whole thing's a scam. Like, it's a scam. So when you say, like, just as an example of what it breeds, all right, let me just give you an example. This is one little story. I had a friend from that area, tall, handsome French guy. His dad was a judge. He'd been trained since a kid to go to this school, basically. And you know what he used to do as just a fun thing for fun? Right? He'd just rob the local grocery store every day because he knew he couldn't get in trouble. He's just no way, right? Like pure white privilege, if you want to call it that, right? Pure, unadulterated, unfiltered. It was a game. It was a hobby. Meanwhile, you look at France today, burning to the ground, right? The police killed a North African teenager the other day. You think that North African teenager was getting trained to go? And these were also some of the smartest people I've ever been around, because their parents trained them from a young age to be that super cultured, super smart, super cultivated. France is burning, even though they have free education, and everybody went. And France is the most managerial class revolution country, other than, Canada maybe. So it's a dead end. I used to think like you, David. I used to think that it's a scam. It's a complete and total scam. And it doesn't work. Humans just don't operate that way. Again, the brilliance of Bitcoin is that it accepts humans for who they are. The brilliance of actual classical liberalism accepts people for who they are, right? Selfish, greedy, self-interested, all of those things. It's not going to change. It can't change. That's how we're set. That's the system. Bitcoin graffiti. Can we have RFK? Well, he will be big in Europe. His dad was, or his uncle was, and I think he'll do great over there too. He'll change things in Europe just by nature of being who he is. I went to college as the woke stuff was started. I was attacked for my skin color constantly in class debates. I was raised to be colorblind. Yeah, it's no good. I agree with the colorblind stuff thing, guys. I really do. But I have sympathy for RFK's point of view, I guess is what I'm getting at. Universities, medicine, money, Hollywood, the list goes on and on. Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough thing to get across. And Daniel, Daniel says he's in favor of equality as opposed to equity. Yeah, I don't, I think he's going to have to fix his messaging on it, right? But we'll see. I think you're more likely to see an RFK DeSantis ticket. I don't think DeSantis has any chance. He's so boring. It's just too boring. Look at what you're up against, The problem arose when we've all been called a Nazi clout. I was called it a lot when I worked for Harper. Though the awareness created by the internet is shedding a harsh light on the situation we are in, we're becoming aware of how ignorant we are. Yeah, at least the ones exploring cyberspace. Yeah, that's what I think. I became a Donald Trump national delegate and helped him get elected, and just to spite my awesome clout. I love it. Yeah, spite is powerful. Yeah, I love his NFTs, Mr. Mendez or Miss Mendez. I'm a big fan of Trump's NFTs. We laughed about him here the first day, and then we realized we made a mistake. Never laugh at Trump when it comes to self-promotion. He's one step ahead of you. If education is paid through tax, it's not really free, is it? It doesn't compete against the internet. It doesn't even come close. Yeah, it doesn't even come close. I don't understand why we have to throw people into rooms and educate. Life is education. Yeah, that's where I'm at. That's it. This system is what's not. It's abandoned ground to fight over. I wouldn't waste a minute fighting over universities if I was. And we are. Look, Bitcoiners, we are on the battlefront of World War III. We're the beachhead here, and I don't think we need to care about what's happening in colleges. As a Bitcoin, we have events, we have meetups, we have much better systems, and we're going to continue to propagate our systems around the world. So this is just a competing system that's dying, and the order in which it dies is kind of irrelevant to me, or who's around when it dies is kind of irrelevant to me. Stop school subsidy. Universities have placed a network with the affluent as part of an old class system. Yeah, you know, the Carol Quigley book, right? What's it called again? You know, he's got a famous, I can't remember the name of the book, but that's more or less it, right? That think of it like this: the whole world. This is something Balaji talks about a lot right now. Basically, you had a glass full of ice in the 1800s, and what happened was the ice, the liquid, the substrate got warmer and warmer and changed so much over those times. You had a couple of ice cubes left at the top, which were the old political order. So you look at the economic and social order in the 1800s, changed so much with the Industrial Revolution, the Civil War, but the political order was the same right up to World War I. And in the end, those were just ice cubes that melted at the very end. What we're seeing now with colleges is the same as that order. The world has changed so much with the internet and all this stuff, and the substrate itself is different. And you can still see a few of the ice cubes on top, but they're sinking quickly. They sink at the end and very quickly because they melt. And universities are just one of those things. It's the same as the way the liberal nation states were conducting themselves pre-World War I. And so this whole, you know, the Carol Quigley book is really about that. It's about, and this is one of the most important historic books written about that period. We're seeing a repeat of that with different players. And so colleges, to me, is one of those things that has resisted change from the bottom up. It is another one of those that's why the ice cube is so apt. It's a sort of a top down. You would be confused if you just saw ice at the top. You'd think it was still an icy drink, right? It's not the icy drink it was. It's not even close. Most of it is melted. What's left at the top is about to go. And colleges are the same as that, right? It's a part of the Carol Quigley model. You're right, 100%. To pure internet education is winning. Spark says, we're coming to Vermont, Nolan. Toronto just elected the worst mayor possible. Sparks, I've met her before. She's not that bad. Honestly, she's kind of cool. Weirdly, so when the Conservatives first took over in the summer of 2006 in Canada, it was a minority government, and we worked really closely with the NDP at the time. This was Jack Layton's NDP, and she was Jack Layton's wife, of course. And to be honest, she is as anti-liberal as all of us here, like the Liberal Party, right? She was one of the NDPers that I got along most with, and when they became psycho NDPers, she was sort of kicked out. So I don't know what's up with her these days. She's probably changed a bunch. Olivia Chow is her name, everyone, by the way, if you're wondering. Olivia Chow. But honestly, I've met her personally many times and spent social time with her over 10 years ago. So she might be a complete maniac since. She might have had her brain broken by Trump. I don't know. I didn't listen to a minute of her stuff in the Toronto election. But she is one of those liberal left-wing people that I have a lot of patience for and is a little different. She might be psycho now, though, so I don't want to say. But be careful of the fake news on the other end, hyping it up on her being crazy. From my personal experience with her, the list is short of left-wing shit libs that I can stomach. She's one of them, personally. Now, I don't know anything about her politics, and as I said, I didn't pay attention. I don't know what's going on. She might have had her brain broken by Trump. Her husband's been dead for 10 years. Don't know what's going on with her. But I liked her husband. He was cool. I got along well with him. He was from my hometown. I knew him for years before he was in the game, and I knew her. So there you go. I'm gonna say she might not be the worst mayor possible. Now, she gets cast that way. Rebel News says she's so bad. She might be. My experience with her was actually good. Actually good. Don't agree with her, but she didn't dehumanize conservatives, put it that way. And that's mostly what all you can ask for. All right, we're getting long here. We're getting real long. All right, let's see what I got. A lot of comments today, guys. All right, I gotta go quicker. Yeah, this is a good comment from our friend Hodling Eric. Colleges are distracting for the ones that really are productive or want to be productive. Always have to follow politics. They lost all substance. The garage is where the future is conceived. Yeah, that's where I'm at with this. That's where I'm at with this. All right, team. I'm gonna skip a couple of these. Vivek is very. I just had that. Vivek is really impressive. Yeah. Him and RFK have shocked me the most. They're both great. They're both really great. Yeah. Trump hates Bitcoin. That's my thought. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen him say anything good about it. So I would love it if he liked Bitcoin. How long has affirmative action been around? Probably the 70s. I feel like it's a 70s thing, right? And I look, go back in time. I agree with it 100% in the 70s. 100, like it's not even an argument. Now, I agree. You got to ask yourself, when do you sunset it? It could be now. It honestly could be. But for me, that is a question about being right or wrong or whatever. It's a fact-based thing. Strategically, we don't need to give a shit about education and affirmative action. Like it's a lost battlefield for Bitcoiners, and won't even be remembered when they tell the stories of World War III, guys. When the story of World War III is told, this affirmative action thing is not a part of it, right? It's not. It's not like that was the turning of the tide. No. Nope. All right. AI will collect all information out. Yeah. And we will no longer need to think, but decide. Yes. My vision for education, P2P model and all that is that you also have your own eyeball that is helping you educate and is your best teacher and knows where your weak points are, and all that, right? So there you go. Give me a yearly free Mac and Starlink. I'll take that any day instead of primary school. It will be cheaper too. Win-win. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we got an answer on affirmative action. President Kennedy enacted the first, affirmative action law in the early 60s. I didn't know that. Wow, thanks for the note. Thanks for the notes. Carol quickly. Tragedy and Hope. Thank you. Tragedy and Hope. Yes, indeed. Tragedy and Hope. Yeah, great book. And Diesel has reminded you all to destroy the like button. Does homeschooling curriculum hold any credibility for you? If so, is there a particular one that is most? No, Scott, I don't really follow too much of the curriculi. What I mostly do is just work on the fundamentals, reading, math. My kids are pretty young though. All right, I'll give you David. Let me do one more point. Your experience at the college was totally different from mine. Students were all income classes. My parents kicked me out of the house and told me to get a job at the gas station or Home Depot. College saved my life. Our experiences are anecdotal, but I do want to say this. All right, as someone who also came from a poor family, I worked in restaurants from age 13 on. I'll always appreciate the education I was given in Quebec. That was a public education, right? And I'll never turn my back entirely on, I guess you could say, government systems of education. I'll never turn my back entirely because it worked for me. But the world changed from when I was a kid to now. The excuse to have to go to where the books were is gone, and the systems have changed. So I agree with the spirit of what you're saying, and I recognize it in my own education. My parents were not both of my parents didn't finish high school, right? Both did not finish high school. There was a hard cap on what they could teach me. So, but they worked hard. I learned work ethic from them. My mother was a waitress. That's why I worked in the restaurants. I learned customer service directly from her. She was a very good waitress and made a ton of money doing it. My dad had a bunch of skills that I also learned. And so I would have gone nowhere if it wasn't for the public education of Quebec in the 1990s. And so I do appreciate it. I'm not trying to say I come from a point of view that, it's all crap. But it's not as simple as you think. It's not just about giving money. And anyway, the system has been so altered by the internet that it might not make sense. And if I'm sitting here on the battlefront of World War III and I see a field of rhetoric and Michelle Obama is over there on her moral high ground, I'm not going up that hill. Like, I'm not fighting there. I can't win. You can't win. If white Republicans remain so stupid that they don't understand that nuanced racial arguments where Black people aren't going to be given extra stuff, right? It's not going to work. Like, it's a waste of your time. There's better places to argue and put your energy. And I think, Black Bitcoiners, white Bitcoiners get that. And that's why, I guess the whole point today is just to not get caught up in this affirmative action thing one way or the other. It's not the future. It's not what we need to have happen to win. It's not a big day in America. It's big that the troubles people have experienced, like that young boy that went viral, right? Really handsome young man, best GPA. If anyone saw it, it was a compilation of him every day opening his email for all the schools that said no to him because he's white, right? Truthfully, he's white. Right? That's why he didn't get in. And he's just taking it like a good boy in the sense that he's like not getting angry. He's kind of laughing it off. I feel terrible for that kid. I mean, that is absolute injustice. Absolute injustice. But is it strategically important? He's fighting over lollipops or beer money, right? He didn't get to go to the bar. That's what I see, right? A young kid like that, it might seem like it sucks now. But that's why we call this show The Breakup, right? Breaking up is hard to do. It's not easy. That kid was being forced to break up with a system when they wouldn't let him into the Ivy League. He was being forced. Now, a guy like that, when he realizes it's a scam because he's been let out of all the universities, right? You know how much better it is for him? And maybe he might become a Bitcoiner tomorrow, right? You know what we need? People who had the highest GPA who got not allowed into Ivy League schools to be so orange pilled by that experience that they become Bitcoiners and they work on things that will actually help. So look, I agree that there's a place for this. The world just changed so quickly and we got to calibrate on the fly, and we're in the middle of a world war, and to win this war we can't go into battlefields that don't matter. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but education doesn't matter anymore. Bitcoin events, Bitcoin meetups have shown the path. We're going to use that system to educate everyone in a P2P way. And the internet is going to help us get there, and AI is going to help us get there. And all this fighting over colleges won't matter. So, that's what I see. All right, an hour and a half this morning. Geez, no kids here today. I'm alone at the farm, by the way. So they all went to Montreal with those guests that were here yesterday. So they all went to Montreal for the day. But it would be the same thing over there. It would be, two families in the same apartment. So I stayed here. They're coming back here tomorrow. Tomorrow is Canada Day. We'll be going live in the morning, but then afterwards I'll be going to Canada to enjoy some picnicking and other stuff. All right, team. Thanks for everything. Let me get a little bit of this up. There we go. Peace, Patrick. Peace, everyone. Thanks for coming this morning, and see you tomorrow.